Thank you, Jolie. That was great. Please hear the words of Jason Cook for our opening words this morning. We are seekers on a quest to discover truth and meaning. Sometimes we think we've found it, wrapped up, glimmering with newness, straight off the intellectual assembly line. All the answers right here for us. And others, if they'd only listen. But truth has a way of coming in disguise, sometimes wearing rags and sometimes finery, but so often cloaked from our immediate sight. And sometimes that which we have rejected, that which we have let go of or decided was only for others but not us, can be our teacher. Let our time of worship be an acknowledgement of the never-ending journey toward truth and meaning, and our appreciation of those we learn from along the way. Now, I'd like to invite our song leaders up to lead us in our opening hymn, number 188, Come, Come, Whoever You Are. This hymn is traditionally sung as a round, so we're going to give it a try this morning. I'm going to turn it over to our song leader, Vicki, who's going to share instructions on how we're going to do this.
We're going to sing it first in unison, and then we will break off into groups. This is group 1, group 2. I will signal this side when they should come in for the round.
That was so lovely. I'd like to officially welcome you to Buckman Bridge Unitarian Universalist Church, or BBUUC. My name is Alyssa Halliday, and I am so happy to be your worship leader today. As Unitarian Universalists, we walk the path of love. We do this through compassionate and just interactions with each other, confirming with each step on the road our own and others' worth and dignity. Our path is guided by our principles and purposes, which can be found on the back of your order of service. As we are all navigating through this wondrous journey of life, I am grateful that you have chosen to be here with us this morning. I'd especially like to welcome and acknowledge any guests or newcomers that came out to join us on this wonderful Sunday. If you are a new visitor, we warmly welcome you to our humble church. If you'd like to learn more about our church or Unitarian Universalism, we invite you to check out all of the literature on our welcome table near the entryway. If you are interested in becoming a member of our congregation, we offer regularly scheduled Learn About Us classes, and you can speak to our membership chair, Julie Smithers, who'd be happy to talk to you about the path to membership. For any questions, look for someone with a new Ask Me sticker on their name tag. We invite you to join us after the service for refreshments, including fair trade coffee and conversation, which can be found at the back of the sanctuary. Now, at this time, I'd like to ask everyone to please make sure your electronic devices are silenced so that we can enter into our sacred time together. I invite you to close your eyes for a second. Take a breath and feel that air moving in your lungs. And as you breathe out, will you open your eyes and join me in reciting our congregational covenant? Our covenant is printed in your order of service, and I invite you to speak the words together in unison. Please join me. We covenant to engage one another with honesty, kindness, and respect, to value diversity, seek understanding of our differences, and practice gracious accountability with care, love, and empathy. We make these promises to those who are here and those yet to come, so that we may be a safe, welcoming, and beloved community of acceptance, learning, and transformation. Please rise and bow to your spirit and join in singing our call to worship. The words are printed in your order of service. We light our chalice each Sunday morning as a symbol of our faith. I'd like to invite my beautiful daughter, Laurel Halliday, up to illuminate our chalice. Our chalice words today are from Julianne Lepp. We seek our place in the world and the answers to our heart's deep questions. As we seek, may our hearts be open to unexpected answers. May the light of our chalice remind us that this is a community of warmth, of wisdom, and welcoming of multiple truths. Thank you, Laurel. That was really nice. Thank you so much. We take an offering each Sunday to give our material resources with generosity and gratitude. The act of giving is a symbolic reminder that giving is just as important as receiving, that sharing what we have is how we live out our value of generosity. We now take an offering that allows us to exercise that generosity of spirit and deepen our sense of giveness. You can find giving envelopes in the hymnals. For those of you who prefer an alternative method, you can find the QR code in your order of service to donate, or go to the donate link on our website at bbuuc.org. I'd like to invite our ushers for today, Marilyn Jones and John Wrightington, to come forward to accept the offering. We are most grateful for anything you feel able and willing to give. If you are unable to donate, we invite you to participate in this ritual by passing the plate down your row and then back to the next. After the offering is complete, please stand in body or spirit and sing our offertory hymn number 123, Spirit of Life.
And good morning from me. For those of you who are new here, my name is David Dean. I've been a member here for 20 years, and even I can't believe that. Because we are a lay-led congregation, which means we don't have a minister of any kind, the sermons that we present on Sunday mornings come from many sources. Sometimes we share sermons recorded for us on video from UU ministers around the country. Oftentimes, we have sermons written and delivered by exceptionally talented members here. And sometimes we have me reading for you sermons written by extraordinary Unitarian Universalists who have given congregations like ours permission to share their ideas, and we believe you should hear them. So that's why this morning I am presenting a cover band version of this sermon, which was originally written and presented by the late Reverend Dr. Bruce Clear, who faithfully served UU congregations in Vancouver, Indianapolis, and Portland, Oregon. There's a little bit more about him in your order of service, and I am honored to share his work with you today. Some of you may have heard Garrison Keillor's Thanksgiving story, in which Unitarians are featured. Somebody has got to find out what Garrison Keillor's experience is with Unitarians. He mentioned us frequently, and I might add, usually his comments, whether complimentary or critical, are right on the money. In this story, he describes a late woebegone family visiting relatives back east for the holidays, and he mentions that the relatives are Unitarians. And then he says something like this: a lot of folks think that Unitarians have no beliefs. This is not true. Unitarians have very strong beliefs. It's just that what those beliefs are depends on what book they last read. Well, I said it was something like that. So. We are, it is true, often criticized this way. When it comes to religious beliefs, it is hard to pin down UUs. Sometimes we are criticized, and rightly so, for having no beliefs. Sometimes we are criticized, and rightly so, for having too many beliefs, that we believe anything we want. Sometimes these criticisms are appropriate, sometimes they are not. You see what I mean about it's hard to pin us down. The whole subject of Unitarian Universalist beliefs is a fuzzy one. See, the problem with this line of criticism is that in addition to it being true, it's also misguided and irrelevant. Unitarian Universalism is not a religion that is centered around a common religious belief system. A common belief system is oftentimes called a creed and has been universally resisted and opposed throughout our history. Though we do not have a uniformly held religious belief system, I'm convinced that we hold a fairly uniform religious value system, like that expressed in our covenant. Values are quite different from creeds, but that's grift for a different for a different sermon mill, I'm afraid. To say that we don't hold uniform beliefs doesn't mean we don't hold beliefs. On the contrary, most UUs I know as individuals have very strong opinions about all manner of subject, and most of them are not shy in expressing them. The problem is that our beliefs aren't consistent from one person to the next. Most UUs I know have not held the exact set of beliefs over their courses of their lifetimes, but they've shifted, they've altered, they've modified their beliefs as time has passed, and most are not embarrassed to admit that. If the topic of discussion is Unitarian Universalist beliefs, the conversation is bound to be a fuzzy one. Our beliefs change from person to person at any one time, and our beliefs change from time to time for any one person. I've long seen this fuzziness as a strength, not a weakness. We humans are not omnipotent, and we form our beliefs based on the best information we have. If we're being responsible about our beliefs, they're bound to be altered in light of new information, new insights. We tend to agree with the French existentialist philosopher Simone de Beauvoir, who wrote, "To say that life is ambiguous is to assert that its meaning is never fixed, that it must constantly be one." Now, when I say that I've long felt this way, that our fuzziness of belief is a strength and not a weakness, I can prove it. Any honest assessment of human experience has to acknowledge its ambiguous nature. There's beauty in ambiguity. The reason we use resist the rigidity of religious creed, the reason for honoring tolerance and valuing an open mind, is that so much of experience is ambiguous. Simple answers to difficult questions, we know these, they might be reassuring, but they rarely reflect the complexity of experience. I am naturally suspicious of any answer, especially a religious answer, that is presented as certain, absolute, and simple. I am more open to answers if they are presented as tentative. Some years ago, when I was a seminary student, writes Dr. Clear, I praised ambiguity because it seemed to more accurately reflect human experience as I knew it. I praised it because it seemed to be the only honest way to live. I praised it because, like art, ambiguity lends itself to the aesthetic richness of interpretation. I praised it because its alternatives, various forms of certainties, were unacceptable. Now, this morning, I can praise ambiguity for all those reasons, but I have a new one to add to the list. In addition to its consistency with the human psyche, in addition to its beauty of interpretation, in addition to it being a cornerstone of the free mind, ambiguity, I have now discovered, has the added value of being true. It's not just that we experience the world ambiguously. The world is ambiguous. And this time, however, I have a new and improved word. I've traded the word ambiguous for the word fuzzy. It's a much more common sense expression of the same idea. I encountered this new word and this new insight from a member of my congregation who a few months ago recommended a book entitled Fuzzy Thinking, The New Science of Fuzzy Logic. The author is Bart Costco, a professor of electrical engineering at the University of Southern California. What's intriguing in this book, at least for me, is not the justification that our vague opinions are valid simply because the human mind can't be certain about things, but rather the conclusion that our vague or fuzzy or ambiguous opinions may be justified because the world itself is a fuzzy place. Religious fundamentalisms are the natural product of certainty. They are the consequence of a belief that what we know is actually the way things are. But absolutisms of certainty are not limited to religious ideas. We know this. We find absolutists in nearly every field of knowledge, including every branch of the sciences, whenever someone presents an idea beyond all doubt. I've long admired John Dewey's 1929 Gifford Lectures, which were published under the title The Quest for Certainty. In those lectures, Dewey questions all absolutisms, religious, philosophical, scientific, with the argument that the human mind is fallible and subject to all manner of influence that can skew its understanding. Here's one way he says it. The world, as we experience it, is a real world, but it's not, in its primary phases, a world that is known, a world that is understood and is intellectually coherent and secure, unquote. In other words, the human mind can get it wrong, so we can never be content that the ideas and opinions we form about the world are fully certain. Any fundamentalism or absolutism or rigid doctrine about life is only as reliable as the fallible human mind. The quest for knowledge, it's a legitimate quest, for we can learn new insights and improve our understanding, but the quest for certainty is always ultimately illusory. This is where I was years ago on the subject of ambiguity. We can never be absolutely certain about anything because the human mind makes mistakes. Now, what Bart Costco adds to this conversation is that the quest for certainty is thwarted not because the mind is fuzzy, but because the world is fuzzy too. From the time of the Greeks, we have been misled into believing that statements about the world must be either true or false, right or wrong. Either ocean tides are controlled by the moon or they aren't. Either an orange is orange or it isn't. Either gravity holds water in a cup or it doesn't. And we've turned statements of facts into idols about which there can be no doubt. The earth is flat, we once said with certainty, and the sun moves around it. The earth is round, we later said with equal certainty, and it moves around the sun. The earth is egg-shaped or pear-shaped or an oblate spheroid, is a certain later conclusion. And the sun is not a sun, but a star. What all these statements have in common is that they were each propositions that were true or false, right or wrong. They were not just estimates, they weren't guesses, they were statements of fact. The prevailing assumption of Western thought is that all statements must be true or false, completely true, completely false, no degrees in between. Our thinking left no room for something to be partially true or partially false, black and white with no shades of gray. But it turns out that after many centuries of working with this mistaken notion that our statements about the world are only approximations, more or less right, all statements fall somewhere on a continuum between true and false, right and wrong. There is still some truth in the statement. The earth is flat. It's just there's not very much truth in it. The earth we plant a garden patch on is flat. But it's only a very small part of the earth. If you connect it to bigger parts of the earth, you see it really is round. The statement the earth is flat has an extremely small truth value. The statement the earth is round has a significantly larger truth value. But there is more truth value if we say instead of round that the earth shape resembles an egg or a pear. It seems to have an even larger truth value, which is to say it's more true, but it's not absolute or certain truth. Any statement we make about anything in the world is necessarily fuzzy or vague, although some statements are much fuzzier than others. All statements about reality are statements of degree. Are rocks hard? Well, more or less, but usually more. Some rocks more so than others. Is the sky blue? Well, more or less, but usually more. Is snow cold? Well, more or less, but usually more, and so on. Reality is not black and white choices, but rather shades of gray. Costco says it this way. The fuzzy view says that almost all truth is gray truth, partial truth, fractional truth, fuzzy truth. Math, by the way, that's the only exception. Math is the only thing that is either true or false, black or white, but then math statements have nothing to do with the world. They only tell us about numbers. Costco describes asking audiences to raise their hand to the questions. How many of you are tall? How many of you are honest? How many of you are rested? There's no definite answer. Only fuzzy answers to such questions. People are more or less tall, more or less honest, more or less rested. Some are much more and some are much less of each. Though ancient Greeks, like Aristotle, taught us to think in terms of certainty, they could have also taught us about fuzzy thinking. Costco notes that Zeno's great paradoxes, we don't know about Zeno, right? They were models for fuzzy thinking. Zeno instructs us, for example, check this out. Look at a pile of sand and ask ourselves, is it a pile? Yes, it is. Take away 1 grain of sand. Is it still a pile? Yeah. Take away another grain. Ask the question. 3rd, 4th, 5th. Take away thousands, each time asking the questions. Is there a point at which it is no longer a pile? Will it be a pile of sand when there are 2 grains left? 1 grain? No grains? See, the statement, this is a pile of sand, it's a fuzzy statement because there's no way of determining exactly when it is and when it isn't a pile of sand. Bertrand Russell, whom Costco identifies as one of the early prophets of fuzz, though he called it vagueness, he did the same principle with baldness. Take away 1 hair from the head, then another. When does one become bald? Now, I know that these mind tricks are not everybody's cup of tea. I want to assure you before we go any further that there is, in fact, a point that I want to make with all of this. For those of you who don't care to play these kinds of word games, please know I hope to make this all relevant before I finish. I do know there are some of you, though, who, like me, enjoy these sorts of games, so I'm going to give you one more example to this. This one comes not from Costco, but from James Gleick in his book, Chaos. It's an example that troubled me for quite a long time before I read about fuzzy thinking. Gleick tells the story of Benoit Mandelbrot, a mathematician who asked a very sensible question. How long is the coast of Britain? So he imagined measuring it. Now take a picture from an airplane or a satellite, use reference points to measure it, you'll get a measurement. But you'll miss all the subtleties of the small inlets. So you have to get closer, and you measure the inlets, and your measurement will be longer. If you get close enough, you'll see that the water's flowing around large boulders that jut out into the bay. So you have to measure around the boulders. Your measurement is going to be longer. But the coastline includes not just boulders, but rocks, pebbles. You need to measure the water flow around them. Your measurement's going to get longer. And don't forget the grains of sand. And the grains of sand contain a molecular structure that juts out just as the boulders do. They're much smaller. They should still be measured. At each level, the more precise the measurement, the longer the length of the coastline. Gleick says that Mandelbrot found that as the scale of measurement becomes smaller, the measured length of a coastline rises without limits, bays and peninsulas, and the process finally ends with atomic scales. Perhaps. In this imaginary measurement process, each step towards precision reveals how much still needs to be measured. Each attempt to be precise reveals how imprecise the answer is. In Costco's book, he says that precision increases fuzziness. He quotes his own teacher, Lofty Zadeh, chair of the engineering department at University of California, Berkeley, who said, the closer one looks at a real-world problem, the fuzzier becomes its solution. So it's time now, I suppose, to leave the mind games that I find intriguing in Costco's book and try to find a principle or a value that they point to. See, the reason for presenting these various mental exercises is simply to illustrate Costco's thesis: fuzzy thinking is justified because the world we seek to understand is a fuzzy one, not a precise one. Now there is, I admit, a grave danger in embracing this fuzzy thinking. If all our knowledge is fuzzy because the world we know is fuzzy, it would be easy and mistaken to conclude that it doesn't matter what we believe. What we believe isn't going to be precise anyway, and we aren't going to get it right no matter what we do. This is the complaint, you will recall, that is often lodged against Unitarian Universalists. It doesn't matter what they believe. UUs can believe anything they want. Does fuzzy thinking lead us inevitably to such philosophical and theological apathy or nihilism? Does our inability to know anything for certain trivialize what we believe about the human soul, or about the purpose of life, or about the meaning of death, about right and wrong, good and evil, about God, about anything of importance? this is not, to me, the lesson to be gained from understanding fuzzy thinking. Fuzzy thinking is not about getting things right, but about getting things right more or less. This is not because fuzzy answers are some kind of consolation prizes to make up for our inability to know things for sure. Rather, we value fuzzy answers because they're the right answers to fuzzy questions. If questions about rocks and coastlines are fuzzy, how much more fuzzy must answers be about questions concerning the meaning of life? We hold beliefs because we want answers that are right, more or less. And the task is to keep working at it until we are more and more right. Garrison Keillor's characterization of it. Unitarians have very strong beliefs. It's just that what those beliefs are depends on what book they last read. It's both a criticism and a compliment. And it affirms a certain fuzziness, in the positive sense of that word, that's at the heart of who we are. We usually call it a search for truth. We sometimes even call it a religious journey. Whatever we call it, we look forward to the next book, the next encounter, the next conversation, expecting our ideas to be more clearly formed and more adequate than before. Our religious values teach an openness to new ideas and new views, and that value suggests an inherent uncertainty and tentativeness, a fuzziness. If we were certain about our truths, we would have no use for open-mindedness. And there's one other aspect worth mentioning. Consider the statement cited earlier by the engineering professor, Lofty Zadeh. The closer one looks at a real-world problem, the fuzzier becomes the solution. And that's why I suggest that most Unitarian Universalists are suspicious not only of rigid answers, but simplistic ones. The religious journey and the search for truth continue, and in the next leg of that journey, I will not be afraid of fuzzy questions or fuzzy answers. The Reverend Dr. Bruce Clear.
Thank you, David. I'd like to invite our song leaders back up to lead us in our closing hymn, number 1064, Blue Boat Home, which can be found in the teal hymnals. I also invite the congregation to stand in body or spirit and join together in singing our closing hymn, again, number 1064, Blue Boat Home. We'll be singing all 3 verses, and don't forget to turn the page. When we are finished, please remain standing for the benediction and the chalice extinguishing.
Standing on these mountains.
Please remain standing for the benediction. I'd like to call Laurel back up, please, to extinguish the chalice as I read these words from John W. Brigham. Go your ways, knowing not the answers to all things, yet seeking always the answer to one more thing than you know. May it be so. Blessed be. Thank you for being with us today.